We're excited that Schellman and AIUC are launching a partnership. We're here to talk about today why we need another AI standard. I'm Danny Manimbo, Managing Principal and Lead of Schellman's ISO and AI Services. I'm joined today by Rajiv Dattani, Co-founder of AIUC.
Danny, thanks for having me. Why don't you get us started? What are you all seeing in the AI security and GRC space right now?
Every enterprise is deploying AI, but the conversation shifted. A handful of years ago even, there was the question of should we or shouldn't we with adopting AI. Now everybody's doing it at scale, whether that's to increase revenue or do things more efficiently. Either way, we have enough of a sample size today to see what can happen when this goes wrong. When organizations aren't asking the question, how do we do this safely? How do we do it securely? And security leaders are faced with a whole new classification of risk today with autonomous agents taking actions. They are handling sensitive data. They are directly interacting with customers. And we need more than just governance frameworks. They need assurance around how these agent safeguards actually operate in practice.
We're hearing a lot of the same from our enterprise partners and customers. And maybe relatedly, Schellman were the first ANAB certified ISO 40001 body. Mm-hmm. You're now the first AIUC-1 accredited auditor. Tell us more about that and what that means for you all.
As you mentioned, Schellman, first ANAB accredited ISO 42001 certification body, now the first authorized assessor for AIUC-1. Our mission is really to evolve our services to match the real world risks that our clients are facing. As AI is becoming more agentic, we need assurance that customers are seeing that agent safeguards are technically being validated against the real world risks that they're seeing out there today.
How does ISO 40001 differ from AIUC-1?
ISO 42001 certifies and validates that an organization has a management system in place, right? They have policies, risk management, governance controls, which I think are still a required discipline for any effective risk management program at an organization that's using AI. However, security leaders are asking deeper questions about how agents stand up to real world threats. And that's part of the benefit of AIUC-1, right? They are getting technical validation of these agent safeguards against thousands of risk scenarios.
How do you think about scoping an audit for ISO 40001 and for AIUC-1? What applies at the organizational wide level and what applies at the agentic product level?
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that while 42001 can certainly be applied at either the organizational level or product level, AIUC-1 is intended to be specific to the product. And when you're thinking about auditing agents, it is different than other AI systems, right? You're not just auditing outcomes with agents, it is the actions that they're taking. So when you're auditing agents, we need to ensure that we're testing adversarial robustness, tool call reliability, and how the agent responds when an end user tries to manipulate it, right? So part of what we're looking at with AIUC-1 and what attracted us to it is that it is running thousands of these threat scenarios to see how agents stand up to real world threats like prompt injection, manipulation, and data leakage.
What are enterprise security teams asking for that they couldn't get before and now they can?
Well, I think if you think about traditional governance frameworks, let's take ISO standards, for example. They're typically only updated every 7 to 8 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I wasn't hearing a whole lot of talk about AI agents 8 years ago. So part of what really excited Schellman about the ability to partner with the AIUC and the AIUC-1 certification is that it's updated quarterly. And we have, with that, the latest in AI research, the latest in threat taxonomies are out there. So it's giving certified organizations confidence that their agents are robust in withstanding these current threats and technologies. And to us, that really excites us about the real value and impact of the independent certification that we can perform together.
And it's mind-blowing to think how new still ChatGPT is. And
correct.
It was only 3 and a bit years ago that
was
was launched.
It's moving fast.
Agents feel like they're upon us before we know it.
Absolutely.
How would you advise a customer or a company thinking about ISO 40001 versus AIUC-1, how to sequence them, how to choose between them?
Correct. So as mentioned, 42001, I do believe it lays down the required discipline groundwork for an AI risk management program, right? You're doing everything from determining your objectives, accountabilities, responsibilities, roles, risk management, doing your system impact assessment. It aligns very well with what we're seeing out with the regulations as well. How do you determine your system might be high risk and fall under certain obligations with, say, the EU AI Act if you haven't done certain AI impact assessments and risk assessment activities that are required for ISO 42001. That said, on the other side of the house, I like to say that 42001 is more on the governance side. AIUC-1, deep technical validation of your system against a lot of these threat taxonomies that we see out there, whether it be the prompt injection or the data exfiltration, the manipulation, et cetera. So if you're more concerned on the technical front, AIUC-1 is going to be for you because those threats aren't called out verbatim the way they are in AIUC. That said, as we're starting to do with a lot of these initial clients, we're doing them together because you have the best of both worlds. You have the governance foundation, and then you also have the technical assurance that you get with an AIUC-1. One caveat is, of course, as we've seen in our initial on-ramp of clients, you may be able to get that AIUC-1 certification quicker than with a ISO 42001 certification because of the formality of that stage 1 versus stage 2 and taking anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get the initial ISO certification.
How would you advise someone chooses between ISO 42001 and AIUC-1?
Best value is going to be to bundle them. Our teams work together, integrated request list, and it keeps things efficient from an audit footprint standpoint. We request evidence one time, we can reuse it across both frameworks, and clients can end up getting the best of both worlds with both certifications.
And maybe in brief, what are the differences between them?
ISO 42001, we like to call it, it's a governance framework, right? Heavy emphasis on policies, procedures, documentation of risk assessment activities and your governance level controls, whereas AIUC-1, much more specific around the technical controls that are going to be audited. 42001 leaves that a bit more broad and open-ended, whereas you really get that specificity, especially with mandatory controls and the time frequency of controls and how frequently those controls are updated with something like an AIUC-1 versus 42001. You built AIUC-1. Why did you build it, and what gap were you trying to close?
When we spoke to enterprises, AI adopters, as well as the AI builders, we were hearing consistent feedback on their concerns. They were worried about jailbreaks. They were worried about prompt injections. They were worried about data leaks. And they were looking for a single standard that integrated all of their concerns into one framework. And at its core was technically grounded and auditable. And there isn't anything in the market that fills that role. And so we brought together the insurers who insure against this risk, the enterprises who adopt AI, the AI builders who are actually on the frontier and developing the AI products. And we worked with them to build AIUC-1 with its 6 principles and the 50 requirements to cover all of the risks that matter to enterprises.
The community that you built around AIUC-1 is very impressive. Now, walk us through the certification process. What are you testing?
The core of it is technical evaluations. We run more than 5,000 technical tests that cover all of the risks that matter, and they're rerun quarterly because we know that AI is moving so fast that even if you build an agent today and it's built on top of this generation of models, by the time 3 months rolls around, the product will have changed and the foundation models have changed. And so that's really the anchoring. We test for the security risks, data leaks, hallucinations, tool calls, these concerns that we kept hearing from enterprises. We then combine that with what are the technical measures and the operational policies you need to have in place to make sure you've got a well-rounded governance framework. So this is things like, have you actually enforced your data retention? Do you have permissions to train on customers' data if that's how you're using it? And how long can you actually store it for? What access does an agent have to your internal systems? And is it able to actually access sensitive data that it shouldn't, or make edits to systems that it shouldn't be able to? And together, that's the core of the testing. We run those tests over a period of typically 4 to 6 weeks up front. We will help the customer get audit ready, and then that's what we'll hand over to your team and Schellman conduct the audit.
What makes AIUC-1 stand out, and what we're excited about as far as the impact and the value that the certification can have, are those quarterly evals, because that's unique. You look at ISO standards updated every 7 to 8 years. So the fact that clients are always being assessed against the latest and greatest of AI technology and research is a huge value add. How does AIUC-1 differ from other standards that we see out there in the AI world, such as ISO 42001 or NIST AI RMF?
We typically see two buckets of standards out there. Mm-hmm. One is the group of standards that aren't technically grounded. So ISO 40001 is a great governance standard.
Correct.
It really thinks about the accountability and the management systems that you need to have in place, and doesn't cover the technical risks, doesn't require technical testing, and just trusts the policies. Mm-hmm. And we think in the AI era, and what we're hearing from enterprises, is that's not enough. They want the technical testing. On the other hand, you have more principle-based frameworks which provide guidance like NIST AI-RMF, but these aren't designed to be specifically auditable. They don't give the specificity for builders or auditors to know exactly how to meet a requirement and to certify whether it's been met. And so we take the best of these, and we take the requirements that matter from ISO, but also the principles from NIST AI-RMF. We looked at CSA's work, MITRE's work, and collectively we've built crosswalks to each of these frameworks and made sure that the really important risks from each of these are covered. But in particular, they're covered in a technical first and specifically auditable way that allows both the builder and the adopter to know that they can adopt that agent with confidence.
Let's talk about the standard and how you keep it developed and up to date. You've assembled a consortium of over 60 security leaders. How does that consortium help shape the future development of the standard?
So we're privileged to have these Fortune 100 security leaders, risk leaders, GRC leaders, who really want to work with us on shaping the standard. They really want to build the standard of the future because they see the need for it, and they also see the societal need for it, and they want to help their peers. And so we bring this group together to really shape the roadmap for the standard. What are the risks they're seeing? What's the next frontier? What are the questions they're getting that they don't yet have answers to that we should be thinking about now? And then as it gets into each quarterly review cycle, they work with us, they roll up their sleeves to really help write and peer review the standard in a lot of detail. Would I understand what this requirement meant? Would I be able to audit against it? Does it cover the risk that I'm worried about? These are some of the questions they ask us. And then it's only once they've peer reviewed it that we publish it as a quarterly update.
What should AI builders take away from the partnership between Schellman and AIUC?
They now have a trust mark that they can look for. The AIUC-1 certificate gives them the confidence that they can deploy that AI with confidence. And not only that, they know that they can now ask for the Schellman audit report. All of the detail, all the controls that were checked, all the evidence that was looked for, and they can use that internally and with their boards or with their customers to know that the risks have been addressed.
Rajiv, thanks so much for joining me today and answering some of these questions. If you'd like to start your own AIUC-1 certification journey, please reach out to us.